Hi, it's Richard here, and I'm joined today with John Butler. He's someone I've followed for probably the past year and very keenly during lockdown as he's produced some really great content, which has been really helpful to me, and I know many other people too. And I can tell that because when I started following you, you had about 20K subscribers, and in almost a year, you've grown exponentially, and it's sort of times by five, and you've become sort of quite the online spiritual teacher, if you will. And I just wondered to start, how did your YouTube career begin? Was it something that you thought, I'd just like to make a video, or was your sort of friend and assistant Phil, did he kind of say, let me put you on camera? And how did that all begin?
Unwillingly, Richard, and unexpectedly, completely. Nothing to do with me at all. Quite unbeknown to me, a young man who was coming to me to meditate was in touch with Conscious TV. I'd never heard of that. It was another channel, I suppose you know about it.
Mm.
And he, without asking my permission, suggested they contact me, which they did, and invited me to go to London. Well, I didn't want to go to London, did I? So I said, no, I don't want to go to London to be interviewed. So that was that. And then a month or two later, they contacted me again. And again, I said I didn't want to go to London. So eventually they said they'll come and see me here in this little town of Bakewell where I live. So they did, and I didn't know what was going to happen. I don't think I'd even ever seen the program Conscious TV. Anyway, that was the first time I'd ever been interviewed, and they interviewed me, and I was still a bit bewildered by it all. I didn't know anything about what was happening, and then, much to my surprise, I can't remember if I actually watched the interview or not, or quite what happened. But anyway, I think soon afterwards, Phil, who'd found one of my books in a second-hand bookshop in Sheffield, he turned up and was interested, and we got talking, and I think he mentioned Conscious TV and said it was a success, and well, no one was more surprised than me. So we looked at it, and then I think he suggested that we make a few more videos. So, well, nothing ventured, nothing win. I don't mind. So we had a go. When we look back at those early videos, they seem very amateur. Even Phil, who's clever at these things, didn't really know what he was doing, I don't think. And anyway, we had an assortment of different cameras and things, and eventually got better at it. And nobody was more surprised than me to see how the numbers built up.
Mm.
So fancy that at the age of 80.
Well, I suppose that does lead to the question, as in, do you ever consider how you're received by other people, or is it you seem to have come to this understanding and it's simply just articulating that? Because I can see on your videos you get plenty of letters from people all around the world asking you all
Yes,
sorts of questions.
Well, it's all new, Richard. I learned to meditate as a young man, and I was part of a school of meditation in London, and so I was in a small way. I was guiding meditation and helping others, but only in a very small way. And it was absolutely a tenet of the school was that we got no public recognition for what we were doing. It was all voluntary work, and I never expected any sort of public recognition of it. I was that's why I was a bit embarrassed, really, when all this started. It didn't seem quite right to me, really, but Yes, I was amazed really when some people started making these nice comments. It was something completely new to me. Um, I wasn't used to it at all. Well, of course, who wouldn't be? I wasn't displeased. I was a bit chuffed, really, but I still can't quite believe it. Take it with a pinch of salt. But of course, some of the comments are very touching, and my heart responds absolutely. And if people think I can help them, well, God willing, I'll try. But I certainly don't think of myself as you mentioned in the first part of this when you started speaking, teacher. I don't think of myself as a teacher, my dear, or anything like that. I'm just an ordinary man who's plodded on the long, hard, long road to meditation all my life. That's the only qualification I've got.
And that really is one of the great things I think about your videos as well, that I've seen you say things like that a lot. You do have a humility about yourself. And I've seen people write to you about all sorts of issues, whether it's depression or complex things about religion, and you don't seem to offer these massively intricate, complex answers. You come back to this simple truth within, and as I believe it, you've stated this feet on the ground idea. And if you could just articulate that a little bit, it would be quite nice just to flesh out what that means.
Well, I remember my granddad telling me that when, as a young man, yes, from a very young age, I was sort of brought. I was a country boy, and I was brought up, or well, I was born before and was brought up during the Great War, and it was just a time when machinery was beginning to come into farming, and what was then called artificial fertilizers and things, and cars were becoming common, and a lot of things which really were labeled artificial as compared to natural. And I took all this rather deeply and passionately, clung to what I felt was natural, and resisted what I felt in my childish way was encroaching civilization. I didn't really like that. I was, for me, towns was the very antithesis of what was natural. And I think my granddad, both my father and my granddad, felt I was going a bit sort of wild and fanciful in my thinking, and so cautioned me to keep my feet on the ground, my boy. So that went into my young mind, and now, to my great surprise, it's become a sort of international slogan, hasn't it? Well, it's a jolly good one too. I can't think of anything better. When mixed up young men write to me and with all these fanciful ideas, I pass on the good advice.
One of the things you touched on there was something that I'm certainly very passionate about in this area I work in, and that's mixed up young men. And I think I've benefited greatly from people such as yourself and your videos coming back to this simplicity within. And I think one of the main things that I know I struggled with for a long time was a very deep sense of confusion, if you like, and really not being able to rest in myself at all. It wasn't until I started engaging with sort of spiritual work, if you like, and so forth, that was even opened up as a possibility. And there are lots of young men today who, I might write content in that regard, and they'll often write to me saying, I've never even been open to that sort of thing, never even knew it was there. And there are a lot of young guys today who are struggling and very lost. And I know in my own story, I had to really sort of be humbled by life, so to speak. I had so many ideas about who I was and so on. And it built up over time, and I became very wounded and trapped within myself. And then I sort of had this experience where I kind of lost everything, lost the job, lost my relationship and so forth. In the years preceding, my own brother had also lost his life. So I knew something was affecting me quite strongly, and my generation, if you like, of men. And I was looking around, a lot of them seemed to be a bit lost. And I just wonder if you can speak to that in any sense of, is this the trials that young men go through when they're trying to find themselves in this world and find the internal truth? And is there anything that you've experienced with young men coming to you and saying, you know, I'm feeling lost and where do I go? And what would you say to them?
Well, first of all, it isn't only young men, and it isn't only young people.
Mm,
The whole world is lost. It's almost by definition, the human situation is lost. Let's come back to the beginnings. If you'll forgive me, I'll come back to the good book and talk about in the beginning of paradise. It is a good place to start. And what happened? Man went wrong, did something, he disobeyed the law and was cast out of paradise. And he's been wrong ever since, hasn't he? He fell into what the Bible calls sin. And sin, well, we can talk more about that if you like, because I know it's rather an unfashionable word, but it's a very useful word to describe the human condition. Lost sheep, as it were. The Bible talks a lot about lost sheep, doesn't it? It describes us as lost sheep needing to come back home. So it's perfectly normal to be lost, and a jolly good thing, because if we weren't lost, we'd never recognize we're in the wrong place. How do we know we're in the wrong place? Because we die. It's as simple as that. Why do we die? Why does everything around us die? People talk about what's the destiny of man? The grave. It becomes ever more obvious when you're old. So, was man born to die? Just to die? To live and die? Poof, like a puff, like that? Or is there something better? Is there an alternative? Well, of course there is, as wise people have always known. It's a jolly good thing that young men who haven't got the message yet feel discontented and lost. This is nature's way of teaching us that we're in the wrong place. It's dreadful to be content in this world. It's just awful, because if you're content in this world, you're just like a prisoner shut up in a little box, a prison. What? Death cell, death row, you could call it, and sitting there completely content. So, bingo for all the mixed up young people, of which I can tell you I was the most mixed up of all of you when I was a young man. Now then, I told you I was a country boy, and I've always had that sort of instinct to turn to nature when I got confronted by the agonies of man. Somehow, some instinct, just like I'm talking to you now, I lift my eyes beyond the computer screen, and there's the sky. It's a deadpan grey this morning, rain clouds. But I always feel comforted when I look at the sky. It sort of lifts me out of the world of man into another world, a world that's natural, a world that's sort of, it's not opposite to man, but it contains man within a bigger a bigger context, something that's more reliable. Man is all questions, and what shall we do, and this and that, and what do I say? But nature is sort of, that's comforting, isn't it? It's just reassuring. It's just there. And then I can see some winter trees and the outline of a hillside and raindrops on the window and all these sort of familiar things that are unaffected by the human condition are just there, reminding me that there's an alternative. There's another world, a natural world. And somehow that puts the unnatural world of man in, gives you a balance, doesn't it? So that's always been my number one comfort, really. And I'm not generally a man that turns to other men for help. I do take on board I'm going to quote from the Bible, I'm rather keen on that. Another phrase from the Bible, put not your trust in princes, neither in any child of man. I'm a great believer in that, because without sort of making any conscious decision about it, I think always I've somehow, I'll say, returned from encounters with men to nature, and somehow felt in contrast to what was often the sort of rather confusing conditions of human contact, to the reassurance of nature. So it hasn't been difficult for me to always be a bit skeptical about human answers. And I've never really, I have read quite a bit of philosophy, pretty well. I've touched, at least touched most of the well-known spiritual figures of my time, but I'm not one who runs to the internet and scours the spiritual teachers in search of an answer. I'd much rather just lift my eyes up and look at the sky. I somehow get more meaning from that.
So could we just return to the sin for a moment? Because I do think this is a really helpful topic to explore. And I think, as you said, it's not a very fashionable word today, and people tend to veer away from it. But in the context in which you're using it, would it be right to say then that this human world is a world of sin, if you like, because we've turned away from this more foundational truth?
Yes.
Being.
Absolutely, it is, Richard. It is as clear as can be in the Bible. This world is under what's called the powers of darkness. This world is a world of sin. Man is a sinner. And if it would help, I've got a favorite way of demonstrating this, which I find very helpful. And maybe if some of your viewers aren't familiar with what I've said before, I'll take a minute or two to explain it. If you look at my face now, even though the sky is grey, I'm looking at the light, aren't I? And my face is lit. So I can see. Now then, without disturbing all these microphones and things which hang around me, if I turn around like that, with my back to the light, you can't see my face, but you can imagine my face is in shadow, right? And so I project shade, don't I? And so in contrast to this, which is light, this is dark. Got it? Now, what could be simpler than that? Now, that's this. In here, I can see, so I know. Here, I can't see, so I don't know. So you can say that the sin is ignorance. And of course, because people don't know, they're lost. They search here and there, usually among people as blind as they. So the blind lead the blind, and that's the human condition, isn't it? when really all we have to do is just turn back to face the light, which is in biblical language is called repentance, which is simply turning the right way around. Goodness me, and then we're back in the right place. End of problems. As simple as that.
And I think that's the key word, simple. And I think maybe today, well, maybe throughout human history, we tend to have this proclivity to look for complicated answers.
Exactly. We do.
And maybe sometimes this is so simple that we think it can't be so simple. I've got to think it through and create all these rich philosophies. Yes. And I suppose it goes back to this feet on the ground type idea of just coming back to simplicity.
Do you know, I've got an ingrained distrust of complexity. I was a farmer, and when I studied agriculture, I went to university and I've got a sort of rudimentary knowledge of science and that. But more than that, I really loved the soil, and I studied the soil, and I spent many, many years just working with the soil. And anybody that just takes a handful of earth and just looks at it, probably if you've got good eyesight or if you must use a microphone or something, what do you call it? Not a microphone, a magnifying glass. It's an absolute miracle of, well, first of all, the physical structure of good soil, little crumbs and all. A wise lady once said, I was talking about the wonders of the structure of the soil. And she said, yes, it's like a cathedral, isn't it? All turrets and towers and windows and little passages and air and full of beautiful forms and shapes. And it's like a cathedral, and we should treat it as such. Absolutely. Amen. And so I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but one of the terrible things I realized as a farmer is that this incredibly beautiful structure of soil, which not only was physically so beautifully formed, but was full of life. First of all, the life you could see, the little worms and spiders and centipedes and wriggly things. And then we're told all the different fungi and microscopic life. I remember being told there are more bacteria in a pinch of soil than there are people in the whole world. And that's only the beginning of it, the wonders of soil. And the way we treat soil, we put our big clumsy feet on it and a million times worse, we drive motor cars over it and heavy machinery and crush it, and it's just like a giant putting his foot on a city, on a cathedral, crushing the life out of it. And I began to see farming and myself as a farmer in that role of the destroyer. And that led me to thinking, well, what the hell am I? What am I doing destroying this miracle of life around me in the name of being a farmer, doing the good work of being a farmer? How is it that with the best intentions of the world to create good food and all this, I was one of the first organic farmers. In the very act of doing what I felt was best, I was destroying what I loved most, which was the land. And see, that led me to think that what is man? What happily am man? How is it that we're in this crazy situation? And then I began to understand, because I'd already started to meditate then, and I'd come to understand that there was within myself this really equivalent of the sky, this infinite containment, which I look at the sky, I was telling you, the comfort of finding this, as it were, other dimension that was bigger than me. And meditation taught me to find that within myself, you see. I didn't always have to go to the sky to look at it, or go up, climb the hills to find space I loved. It was within myself. Now, well, what is that? And then I began to put two and two together with the help of the school where I was learning meditation, and realized that there's sort of two things. There's a part of man that is not really what I am, which is just transitory and condemned to die, and on the way on the pathway to his own death, he destroys what he most loves very often in the process. But there is this other aspect of man which is not like that, which is spirit, which is invisible, rather like the spaces, the infinite space. If you go beyond the sky, you come up into the infinite, don't you? There is this infinite dimension in man, which we will eventually realize is spirit. And that's really what man is. And see, spirit doesn't die, does it? It's incorruptible. So all the problems of so-called humanity sort of just die out. Literally, they do. They die out. Because you don't need to do anything about it. You just wait long enough. Humanity dies out. If you don't die out with a virus, you'll die of old age or something, or some other reason. But you see, if man discovers the reality of spirit, that is what man actually is, then you see he can just take life in his stride, laugh at it, because he knows that that's just a performance, a passing show. And real man is spirit.